Good evening. This is Debra V. Wilson. It is Monday, the 17th of June, 2019. I'm in England, and the time is 2100 hours and 4 minutes, and that's GMT. So in looking at national security modeling, I look at it from several perspectives. And tonight, tonight what I've decided to do the podcast on, another stream of consciousness, is something I've been thinking about for several weeks now. And I'm going to try to articulate what's going through my mind at this point. So I look at the ways in which national security models are constructed and how they are built and why they're built the ways in which they are to reduce the likelihood of a terrorist attack. And for the purpose of this podcast, the context would be the United Kingdom, although I'm going to be looking at people who are not British and not based in the UK. So I'm looking at the construct, the ways in which narratives are understood by society, and terrorists are parts of society, and people, how they construct those narratives and what those narratives mean to them, and how people defined as terrorists and or extremists believe in narratives, societal constructed narratives, and how they exploit them, whether it's because they actually believe or it's a tool, and how people who have been manipulated and groomed by terrorists, how and why they believe them. So the narrative that I'm looking at today is the construct of women and who women are. I'm looking at the Bethnal Green Trio, and you're going to hear some clicks because I've got some pages up that I'm referring to. And the Bethnal Green Trio are three young British women who left London. They attended the Bethnal Green Academy in London, and in February 2015 they left the UK to join ISIL. So again, my context is Britain, and one of the reasons they left was to join ISIL and to help in the performance of very regressive gendered roles, to be companions to the fighters, to have the babies of the fighters, to keep other women in line, quote unquote, other females, I'm sorry, and to communicate and establish a culture which would sustain ISIL. They were going to be the good wife. So the question I've always asked is, to me, it's two-pronged. Why would three young girls leave London, England, leave school to join in a fight, a war, irrespective of which quote-unquote side you're on? But then the other question I ask is, why in one of the most cosmopolitan and sophisticated cities on the planet, that would be London, England, three young girls at the beginning of their lives would leave to go anywhere to be a modern day Donna Reed? Why would of course it's significant that they left to be the good wife, quote unquote, to terrorists. Of course that's significant, but at that age, why would they want to be a wife? Why didn't they see themselves as we're just at the beginning of our life? When you're a teenager, that's when you start to have some autonomy. You're going to uni, or you are in uni. You're mapping out your life, what you want to do. Again, this is London, England. And so then that takes me to the ways in which gender narratives are communicated and enforced and branded. And again, the narrative being the woman, the girl, the good wife, the good woman. And that brings me to Beyoncé and CardiB. I'm going to remind you that I'm 61 and I am out of step with who and what is, old lady alert, who and what is happening, right? I didn't even know who CardiB was until about a year ago. I'd never heard of her. I did say it's an old lady alert. Beyoncé, it had been years since I've actually sat and watched any. I was still watching Destiny Child videos. So recently I watched Homecoming on Netflix, which is actually this brilliant exploration and presentation of aspects of African American culture. There are these amazing voiceovers that talk of the struggle of African Americans and the perseverance and the resilience and the strength and the intellect of what is my ethnic group, African American. But there's this continual overlapping of this validation of self, of this pretty antiquated narrative about black women. I am my body. I am my body. And instead of challenging that narrative about the way in which women are valued, it's one of the ethos of the video seems to be that the movie, the documentary seems to be that black women's bodies are just as hot and sexy as white women's bodies. Instead of saying, well, we're people, we're complex. The other thing is that I find troubling, and that's about with CardiB and Beyoncé, is that there seems to be the narrative within the constant peddling of this narrative that CardiB is a woman of color, and this constant narrative of we're just as good as the white women, we're just as hot as, we're just as sexual as the white women, and that this sexualized space being occupied by both entertainers is that it's validated because they're getting paid, they're making bank. CardiB's videos, I have to admit I can't get through them. I've sampled probably about 10 of them, and maybe it's like perhaps I've watched maybe 2 minutes per video. It's a strip show, but it's validated by this pseudo pride in body, and that and my body is just as good. The underlining theme of CardiB's videos, as well as my body is just as good as a white woman, so let me make bank money out of it. So certainly there's a difference between this aberrant construct of the good woman, the good female by the Bethnal Green trio, and which took them to be the Donna Reed of a modern day Donna Reed for some terrorists, okay? And the perpetuating and peddling through the monetization of regressive narratives about women of color and women in general, by which I believe is what's happening with Beyoncé and CardiB. Nevertheless, I think there's a continuum. I think it's a continuum with the Bethnal Green trio. It's the peddling of this trope, like tried and not true trope of what is the good female, but it's for the caliphate. So it's validated that way. And with CardiB, Beyonce and CardiB, it's because I'm making bank. I'm a woman of color, and I'm making what's mine. But it's still the peddling of these tropes, these regressive narratives about women. I'm aware that Bell Hooks referred to Beyonce as a terrorist and anti-feminist. I do not think Beyonce is a terrorist. However, I do understand Bell Hooks' concern about the performance, the construct of Beyonce, the performer. And it is the utterances of Bell Hooks, Beyonce is a terrorist, that led me to this podcast about the continuum. I'm absolutely consumed with what emerges from society and becomes problematic, I think, because it's limiting, it boxes in people. Sexism, racism. And then I look at those regressive narratives, and in this case, again, I'm doing gender. And then I look at when those regressive narratives become part of a strategy by the utilization and internalization utilization and or internalization of regressive narratives, and then again, in this case again, it's gender, become part of a strategy for terrorists, building a terrorist model, which is what ISIL did and is evidenced by the Bethnal Green Trio. But I'm going to argue that that strategy didn't come out of nowhere. I'm going to argue that regressive narratives about what is the good woman that are littered through our society and that have been normalized for some of us because the women peddling these abhorrent constructs of the woman, the female, the girl, are getting paid. And it's operating on a continuum. So there's that. And then at the extreme, it is extremist. I did say this is my stream of consciousness. I'm doing that a lot these days, and it helps me to work through as I think through, and it is very conducive, and it provides it's a fertile space for me to give voice to what I'm thinking on and pontificating about. I am, next week I will be in London, and I'm going to do some focusing on, from an academic perspective, whatever's out there publicly, on MI5 and SO15. I'll post where it's appropriate to post. Every once in a while, I get on these. Every once in a while, I'm owning my space. I've become quite convinced that I'm going to find someone in MI5 and SO15 that'll sit and talk with me. If nothing else, I'm tenacious. Some would say delusional. I say tenacious. So in any case, I will post my journey. I'm also realistic, but in any case, sometimes the pleasure is in the journey, and it'll be very helpful for me to be in London to do some research, so I will post that as well. This is Debra V. Wilson. I am in England, and it is Monday, and it's the 17th of June, 2019. Time is now 2100 hours and 19 minutes, and that's GMT. And I'm looking at the proliferation of regressive and rather old and tired narratives around gender, the female, the girl, the good woman, the good girl, and regressive and aberrant narratives I consider aberrant and limiting are normalized, whether it's by pop singers. I don't know what Cardi B is considered. I did say old lady alert, so I have no idea if that's pop, rap, hip hop. I don't know. How those narratives, from one end of the spectrum, aberrant narratives, are normalized by entertainers, and then on the other end of the spectrum, how those normalized and justified, and how those aberrant narratives are normalized and justified by, in this case, looking at the Bethnal Green Trio by ISIL. Thank you for listening.